Welcome to Inconvenient Truths. I'm your host, Jennifer Zeng. In our last episode, we talked about the possibility of Xi Jinping's wife Peng Liyuan stepping onto the center stage of Chinese politics, and that some people don't believe this will happen, as they said Xi Jinping doesn't have the same need to fight political rivals as Mao Zedong did before the Cultural Revolution. But has Xi Jinping really unified China under his rule? In fact, according to former Peking University professor Yuan Hongbin, Xi Jinping currently has at least 4 major crises. The first major crisis is the political challenge from the CCP's prisoning families, also called second-generation Reds, Hong Er Dai. 11 years ago, former Chinese Premier Li Keqiang, who died last year, was expected to become the top leader of the CCP. However, the collapse of the Soviet Union made the CCP prisoning group believe that since Yeltsin and Gorbachev were not the second generation of the Reds, they could not be relied upon at critical times. That's why the prisoners collectively worked to prevent Li Keqiang's ascension to the top, and instead put Xi Jinping, a second-generation Red, at the pinnacle of power in order to preserve the CCP's dominance. What the prisoners didn't expect, however, was that Xi Jinping, after coming to power, has gone on a rampage of centralization and dictatorship, breaking the previously political system of power and wealth sharing among the various prisoning families that existed during the Deng Xiaoping and Jiang Zemin eras. And within the CCP system, losing power means losing everything. Therefore, no matter what kind of grudges these prisoning families had against each other, there is now a consensus that if Xi Jinping continues to act as he has, everybody will all go down together. In other words, Xi must be stopped. So this is the first challenge Xi faces. The second crisis is the fervent fans of the Cultural Revolution known as the Maoist left. Since Mao Zedong and the Cultural Revolution have not been rejected or criticized so far, the leftist forces that worship Mao Zedong often think that Xi Jinping is not leftist enough, and they want to force him to go even further. Sources say that these forces are writing a document that comprehensively criticizes Deng Xiaoping's policies and seeks to reverse the verdict on the Cultural Revolution. The document lists 10 major crimes of Deng Xiaoping's capitalist line, and they are preparing to launch this document on May 16th this year, the 58th anniversary of the official start of the Cultural Revolution. The document, once released, will have a shocking effect on Chinese society and put Xi Jinping in a political dilemma. Xi's third major challenge comes from the tens of millions of officials within the party. Over the past 11 years of Xi's rule, more than 5 million officials have been subjected to various political and legal purges of varying degrees, and if add the families of those officials and the private entrepreneurs and their family members who depend on them, the number of people who have been subjected to Xi's purges has reached at least 20 million. So to some extent, Xi's actions have destroyed the political foundation of the CCP's rule. That's why the CCP is now boiling with resentment from officials. Tens of millions of officials are eagerly hoping that Xi Jinping will die a sudden death. Cursing and mocking Xi Jinping at the dinner table or on various private occasions has become a trend in China, and some people in the CCP official circle call this phenomena the whispering revolution of the officials. They believe that this whispering revolution may be transformed into actual actions sooner or later. Xi's fourth crisis is the existence of a large number of so-called two-faced people. Xi Jinping has spent more than a decade purging the CCP of internal dissidents and building his own Xi's army. But starting with the case of Foreign Minister Qin Gang, he has discovered that there are a large number of so-called two-faced people in the Foreign Ministry, the Defense Ministry, the Rocket Force, the National Defense Industry, the Air Force, the Strategic Support Forces. People who are only loyal to Xi Jinping on the surface, but betray him as soon as they turn around. Xi Jinping had to fight against the officials he had personally promoted. The existence of a large number of two-faced people have become Xi's fourth worry. At present, China's society and economy are suffering. People's livelihoods are difficult and unemployment is on the rise. Admiral Liu Yuan, a typical figure of the CCP's second-generation raids and the son of former Chinese President Liu Shaoqi, is said to have recently owned that there is now a race against time between the outbreak of the crisis of Xi Jinping's dictatorship and Xi Jinping's ultimate military adventurism in launching a war in the Taiwan Strait. If the latter wins, i.e., if Xi launches a war in the Taiwan Strait before the final outbreak of the crisis of his dictatorial rule, then China will surely experience a catastrophe, the likes of which it has never seen before. Of course, this statement was made by Liu Yuan, so he's saying from his perspective that China is bound to experience an unprecedented catastrophe. If Xi Jinping really starts a war, the rest of the world will likewise experience a great catastrophe. In fact, even if Xi Jinping has not yet started a war, Chinese society is already experiencing a great catastrophe. For a while now, China has been experiencing what can be called car terrorist attacks, in which disgruntled people, for various reasons, suddenly drive their cars into crowds of people, sometimes even school children, to kill. On March 19th alone, there were 3 car terrorist attacks in one day. Chinese people call this retaliation against society. As you know, Moscow just had a terrorist attack that attracted worldwide attention. However, in China, these car terrorist attacks, which were handled by officials as traffic accident in a low-profile manner, did not receive any due media exposure. While the death toll in such incidents may not be as high as in terrorist events involving gunfire, the frequent occurrence of such incidents adds up, resulting in a significant number of fatalities over time. We can also say that Chinese society, with its deep-rooted grievances, has already produced and lurked countless homegrown terrorists. And even if Xi Jinping's dictatorship crisis hasn't yet erupted in full force, China's people are already beginning to suffer from all sorts of catastrophes. Well, that's all for now. Please take a moment to like and share my videos or go to my website at jenniferzengblog.com to sign up for a membership or make a donation to support my effort. Thank you. See you next time.